Well, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm your host, Danielle Richardson. And I am very excited today, honestly, because we're going to talk about a topic and get to meet a person that I think is a little nuanced, but I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and there's not really an avenue to talk about it. Sara Somers is who I'm interviewing today. She's actually in Paris right now. She lives there. She moved from the US to Paris not too long ago. And she actually wrote a memoir on food addiction. And I came across her memoir, and I just thought I would love to be able to talk to this lady in person over Zoom, unfortunately, but still in person in a way. So, Sarah, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time, especially with the time zones, to be on the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and any author would be very pleased to be asked to talk about a book because we spend a lot of time writing them, and particularly memoirs are wrenching at times. So I feel like I really want to thank you for noticing it and thinking that it was something worth writing about.
Well, I wanted to ask because because I know most of my listeners probably haven't read your book. To tell you the truth, it took me some digging to find it. Um, can you kind of share why you wanted to write one? I mean, because a lot of people, maybe that chapter of their life they would rather forget than write about, and people know. Why did you really want to write the memoir?
Well, I've suffered from food addiction my entire life, so it wasn't a chapter. The chapters kind of looked like the different methods I tried to deal with it. I didn't think food was the problem. I just thought I had a weight problem, and if I just lost weight, my problems would go away. And so I dieted a lot. I never stapled my stomach or anything like that, but I did every fad and good diet available, and some I would lose weight on, but I'd always end up eating again. And I didn't, I mean, and gaining weight again. And I didn't understand what was wrong with me. So when I finally found a solution that worked for me, I didn't like the solution. And I really resisted it because I realized that what I really wanted was to be able to eat whatever I wanted and also be thin.
Hmm.
And that wasn't going to happen. And what I found out that made me unhappy about the solution is that I was allergic to the ingredients that are in alcohol, which is sugar and grains. And that
Oh, wow.
when
Okay.
I put them in my body, a craving starts and I start binging. And I don't think anybody was holding out on me. I think it's not a topic that people know very much about. So when I finally, in the early 2000s, um, let's say, surrendered, waved the white flag, and just said, okay, nothing else is going to work. And I'm a miserable person. And, if I don't do something, I'm either going to kill myself or go insane. And I knew I was too scared to kill myself. So I went to this solution, which is the Gray Sheeters Anonymous. And darned if it didn't work. And not only did it work, but it's a 12-step program. So they really encourage you to do a lot of get your shovel out and do some in-depth work on yourself in order to stay stopped. That it's
Right.
easy to stop, but to stay stopped, you really have to know what triggers me. So I was, would say abstinent. We were I'm abstaining from binging, from grains and sugar. And at some point, and I've always wanted to be a writer. And so what happened was, and I hope this isn't too long getting to the answer, but
No.
the fog went out of my head, and I started thinking about all the things I'd wanted to do as a young woman in university and in my early 20s, and writing was one of them.
Hmm.
But I had nothing to say. I really had nothing to say because I was always feeling too sorry for myself. So I had moved to Paris in 2013, and I started taking writing classes here because everybody in Paris writes. So they're very available. And I just started writing about what it was like, what it was like, not being able to stop eating, and then what it was like when I finally could. And it hit me that I had something to say. For the
Yeah.
first time, I had something to say. And I really, really I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wanted to do it and finish it because I wanted to give other people hope. It's a horrible, horrible disease, the food addiction, if you have the same that I do. And there are a lot of people who have what I have, but just don't know it. But if I really, this sounds so silly, but if I can do it, I feel like anybody could do it because I was so resistant. And so those were the two reasons. I finally had a clear head, and I could start doing things that I'd always wanted to do as a young woman. And I wanted to write about what I knew and give other people hope. And that's what I've heard has happened. I've gotten lots of mail, from people saying that they really appreciated the sort of intimacy. I don't, I checked to see if there was any other book that actually talked about what happens when you're binging.
Yeah,
And
I didn't.
yeah, so people don't know. And so I went for it. I thought if I'm going to write it, I might as well write everything.
Wow. Well, can you kind of start? Obviously, I want people to be directed to your memoir, so there will be way more detail there, obviously. But can you kind of start from the beginning? When did you notice this? When did it start? How did it kind of manifest itself? And what was kind of the journey there?
Um, First of all, the memoir is called Saving Sarah. If any of your listeners want to go onto Amazon and look for it, I just saw Kitty Cat.
I
Um,
know, here he is.
um, I don't know when it started as an addiction. What I do know is that as a child, I was lonely and angry, and I
Okay.
would sneak into the kitchen, and the word sneak is important because I know other when the kitchen was closed, we dinner was finished, dishes were washed. From the age I can remember, in 9 years old, I don't have a lot of memories before that, sneaking in, going right to the freezer, pulling out the ice cream, and eating it with my ears open to my parents. So I knew I was doing something wrong. I didn't know what it was, but even at 9 years old, I knew I was doing something wrong.
Hmm.
And it progressed from there so that I
But
think,
I was gonna say though, you don't even know how it started with your parents. Like, was it something they said, or the fact
well,
that
I think my parents were very academic, and my mother
okay,
was not a particularly nurturing woman. It just wasn't the way she was wired. And
okay,
um, she really didn't like needy things. I've seen her around my sisters and my cats, and they just get away. And so I think she was annoyed by us, that we needed her attention because she was also a writer, and she wrote books about medicine and health insurance and stuff with my father.
oh
And
wow,
she didn't want to do it, just annoyed her. So she hired women to come take care of us and cook the meals. And I was born in 1947, and that's what a lot of families did, is that somebody would come and clean and cook the dinner. And so I think I was wired that I really needed attention and I really needed to know that I was loved all the time. So you have a mother who's annoyed by the sort of wanting to hang on and tell me you love me, and then you have a little girl who needs that more than anything in the world, and it's combustible. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost, you almost could write the story what comes next. And ice cream, I got angry. I was an angry kid, and ice cream in my little 8-year-old, 9-year-old brain says ice cream puts out the fire. I mean, I didn't think like that back then, but psychologically,
Yeah, it's comforting. Yeah.
yeah, it was, everything was, eating became comforting. And so I turned to food every time I was angry, and I was angry a lot. And it just grew, that I didn't learn many social skills. And it wasn't that they weren't taught to me. I went to great schools. I got a great education. I had the potential of having wonderful friends. I mean, there was nothing wrong with my neighborhoods. I just didn't know how to relate to people because I was so consumed by this need that I had, and the self-pity that came with it when
Hmm.
I didn't get my needs met. And self-pity is can be 100% consuming, that you don't really see what's going on around you. So, I mean, I made it through fine, and I have friends from back then, and they knew something was wrong. They tell me now they knew something was wrong, but they didn't know what. And I got a great education. I went on and got a master's, and I became a therapist. And uh, but that part of my life didn't change, and I was dieting all the time. I remember the first thing, these don't exist anymore, but the first thing I found when I was about 11 or 12 are these little squares called AIDS, AIDS, and you were supposed to eat one, and then you wouldn't eat a full meal. You'd stop eating.
Hmm.
So, I ate the whole box of AIDS. So they tasted like caramels. And that's the way I would approach most diets. I remember joining Weight Watchers when I was, oh, I don't know how old I was. I was probably 20, 21. And as Weight Watchers grew, they started making their own food, and I would just buy it and just consume huge amounts of it. So, you know, diets don't work with a person like me, that they might work for a time. And I don't really understand addiction. Even though I was a therapist, I worked with alcoholics, I don't understand the whole thing. I just know that um, it's a disease that hits people. They have cravings, that they're a compulsion and obsession, and they become powerless over it. And it's not, it can hit any race, any color, it's man or woman. It doesn't really matter. It's a holistic disease.
Hmm.
And, until the 12 steps came along, I don't think there was a solution for alcoholism or food addiction that somebody could say that might work for you. I think people were just mystified by, certainly by alcoholics before AA started, and certainly by people like me who came from good families, had good education, seemed to have good friends. And why was I always going off the rails? So I feel very grateful and very lucky that I found a solution. And that's a very long answer to your question, but there's so much not known about it. I know that a lot of places, scientific places, are trying to do research and trying to understand it more the way they're doing it with alcoholism. But I don't need any of that anymore. And I think most people that I know that are recovering from food addiction don't care, anymore why, or they just want to stay in the solution because it feels miraculous to have a
Right.
solution.
Well, I know you were mentioning earlier about your parents, and especially your mom, and that need for attention. Wouldn't that be, I would think, kind of the source of the food addiction in many ways, is just that.
Well, I think a person has to be hardwired to respond that way because I mean, you and we both probably know people who didn't get a lot of love and attention and didn't turn into addicts. So
See,
I don't think there's any one thing you can look to. I was born a certain way, and you know, my mother happened to be the way she was wired, and for me, it triggered it off. I was too needy. But I don't think I could say that. It would be wrong of me, I think, to say across the board that it's always a parent not loving enough and it
oh,
turns
sure,
into
yeah.
something. Yeah. So
But it almost feels like, because with an addiction, similar to what you said, it's like you're filling a hole
exactly.
that's there. And so somehow that hole did happen. And how that hole happened is different for everybody. Um, but I would think discovering what the hole is would help with the recovery process, wouldn't it?
Up to a point, I was a therapist for 35 years, and I certainly worked with a lot of addicts and alcoholics, and I read profusely.
Hmm.
And I strongly feel today that it's very interesting to know those things. And people like me that are more cerebral, intellectual, it's really interesting. But I think the solution comes from action and that doing the action, staying in the present and just saying, because it's very hard in the beginning,
Yeah.
to not eat those foods and to go out to dinner with people and stuff like that. So that's what I say to people now is that all that psychology, it's very interesting and I love reading about it, but I'm cerebral. But as far as the solution goes, it's action, behavioral action. Just do this, and don't ask a whole lot of questions in the beginning, and then, once you get kind of um, confident that you've got this abstinence down, then we do start psychological because we go deep dive into ourselves and try and understand,
Right.
you know, what do I do? What are the behaviors I do that get in my way that I go out and eat? Well, what do I do that I end up punishing myself?
Yeah.
And so it is, but we we are very careful not to point fingers or place blame because that can trigger the anger and it's not helpful.
Okay.
So um, I have a lot of feelings about the way my mother mothered, um, but I don't use it in my. It's not helpful for me staying abstinent
Right.
and I tried to stay away from that in the book. I think it was obvious to anyone that read it that she wasn't the mother that I needed. And but Danielle, I was in therapy, as a client, as a patient for many, many years. I understood so much, but it didn't help me stop binging and
Yeah.
stop the cravings.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know that anybody understands addiction enough. I think there's some hard wiring. Why is it that some people are geniuses? And why is it that people can turn out wonderful and come from horrible homes and people are horrible and come from wonderful homes? I mean, there's a lot of mystery about the human condition. And um I think it's going to stay a mystery for me. I know scientists are hard at work trying to understand how the brain works, and they know with alcoholism, for instance, is that a part of the brain lights up,
Hmm.
and you can see it in the books. Um, but then there's just the mystery of being human, and the whole. In some ways, it's it's kind of nice that there's a mystery about it. There's things we just don't understand, but
Yeah.
we should pay attention to what we don't understand. And when we hit a wall, don't do it again.
Yeah. Well, for you, what was the worst? What period of your life did you feel was the worst with the binging?
I think that as I got older, I felt more and more hopeless. So I don't know that it was the binging was abs actually worse, but I was feeling so hopeless, and there were times that I didn't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I didn't care what was going on that day. Um,
Were you feeling hopeless because of the binging?
I thought there was no answer for me.
Okay.
You know, I was still quite self-centered, and I didn't know why this was happening to me. And so, I would have periods of finding a diet or finding, I mean, shots. They do a lot of silly things nowadays. And I would lose a lot of weight. And then when it would come back, it would start the hopelessness doubled from the last time that happened.
Sure.
So I learned kind of to put up a wall, that I could almost dissociate from myself so that I didn't know how horrible I was feeling until I was going to sleep, and there was no wall, there was nothing to distract me. But I think that is probably the accurate answer is just the longer it went on, the more hopeless I felt, and the more things I tried and the more they didn't work, the surer I was that I was not going to find a solution.
Yeah.
And
Walk
I was
us. I was
pretty
gonna I was gonna say walk us through like your mind in a day. Like if you're during that time, like what was, because obviously there's so much tension, which in and of itself must be so exhausting. But, you know, if we were to be you for a day in that period of time, what was it like mentally as you were like craving food, knowing you'd gain weight, knowing maybe I shouldn't have this, but really it's like this fight that was nearly impossible. I mean, what was that thought process like for
which is
you?
accompanied by self-hatred and hatred of my body. So not only, so I'd wake up in the morning and probably one of my first thoughts was, today I'm going to do it differently. And and then I would didn't want to look in mirrors. I didn't want to see what I looked like. No matter where I went during the day, I was always checking out the store windows or whatever. So it is a 24-hour obsession of thinking about food, thinking about what I am going to eat or what I'm not going to eat, uh, how ugly I am, how the future might be better, just constant. I had an office in California that was on a street that had a lot of stores, the food stores. And I don't know how often I did this, but I did this quite a bit where I got the craving to eat. And across the street and a block down was a very famous ice cream store. So I would start on my side of the street and go into every food store and try and buy things like carrots and, things that supposedly weren't fattening, but as my father said, anything can be fattening if you're not doing it in moderation. In order to be so full that I wouldn't want to go to the ice cream store.
Mhm.
But as it ended up, I always ended up buying, I'd have a full belly, I'd be completely full, and I'd still buy the ice cream and I'd make myself sick. And that would take maybe an hour out of my day. So I woke up with this promise to myself that today you're going to do it differently. And moving into the day and starting the I guess self-talk would be the best word, but it's negative self-talk.
Right.
Nobody can stand. If another person was doing that to me, I'd hit them, but I was doing it to me, and it just breaks you down. And you I didn't have a mother around. I didn't have anybody around except me, except for what was up here that was doing it to me I'm talking about my 30s and 40s.
Hmm.
And it led to that kind of a binge. And I would be so sick, that I think I wrote this in the book, that there were times I just felt like my belly would burst open. I don't know how it didn't. And so then the rest of the day, if of what was left of it, would just be battering myself. You've done it again. You're so awful. I can't remember the exact words, and maybe I didn't have really words. And I always had I had a journal, and I would write, and but I can't read them now. They're really, really awful writings, and just
Oh,
how
wow.
awful I am, and just it's really like this a broken record, and that just keeps playing over and over again.
How
So,
did how did it affect relationships with other people?
well, again, the it is a holistic thing. It hits me emotionally, physically, spiritually.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I am a walking mess, and made it difficult for me to get really close to people. Um, when I would ask for help, when I felt close enough to a girlfriend, I'd want, and I really want a lot from them. And I think I drained people at times, unless they were similar and we had a lot of back and forth. Um, I don't quite know how to answer that. I just have thought, in the many years since I have been abstinent, that I've listened to people my age that have these incredible friendships from long ago, and the kinds of things they've talked about and helped each other with, and I didn't have that. So I know that there
Hmm.
was something I couldn't do. I couldn't be present really because I was thinking about myself so much.
Yeah.
And for the friendship, and people liked me in spite of that. I mean, as I said, I have friends from 40, 50 years, and they sure like me better now, and and most of them have read the book and now understand, you know but it was a mystery to them, what was going on. And especially if they tried to give me some really good suggestions, if I had a genuine problem that actually was fixable, and I wouldn't follow the directions, so then they'd get frustrated with me. So when I
Sure.
actually asked for help, I often didn't take it.
Yeah. Did it affect any romantic relationships? Like for you, were you even able to have a romantic relationship or connect romantically with anyone? Or,
Well, yes, I had tons of boyfriends, um, but as the older I got, I picked worse and worse men to relate to.
okay.
And they say water, reaches own level, and that's kind of what I did. So I was picking people that were like me, that really loved the courting part, the flirting part, but neither one of us could sustain a relationship once it got past the flirting, past we wanted to get serious, and it was unsustainable because neither one of us knew how to do it.
Hmm. Was that really hard for you? That must have been really painful.
Oh, it was. That was, I mean, it only cemented the belief that I was unlovable. And I had no idea. I'd never heard the word food addiction. I had no idea what was wrong. And you know, lots of money on therapy and good therapists. And it really took a program, these 12-step programs that are just based on changing behaviors. And you change your behavior first, and then it changes your brain. You can't, people like me can't sort of understand something first and then put it into action. I have to do the opposite, to go into
Okay.
action, and then the understanding will, like a light bulb, will go off and go, oh my God, that works. That's what I wanted to do. But I I was very cerebral and intellectual. I wanted to understand things first before I tried it. And
Right.
that works for a lot of people. It, the Jungian Freudian psychology is all based on that, just understanding and then changing behaviors. But for addicts and alcoholics, it doesn't work. You have to
Well,
change the,
because I was gonna say, because the addiction is more powerful than your mental process. So
exactly,
it doesn't
exactly.
really help knowing necessarily. I mean that it does. I don't want to say it doesn't, but that's not gonna help you stop. Um, when did you find this 12-step program? Like, how long had you been facing and struggling with this food addiction before you were able to get help?
Well, my sister is also a food addict, and she found the program and she told me about it in 1983, I think.
Hmm.
And um, and I went to visit her, I think in August. And so she took me to a couple of meetings. And I knew right away that I really was, I could see it was working. But as I said, I just was resistant to whatever worked. It's the strangest psychology. So it took me knowing, absolutely knowing that worked and seeing that it worked with my sister. It took me another 26 years to then, which was then 2005
Wow.
to to go back and say, I need you guys, I need help, and just stop the brain telling me all these reasons why it wouldn't work for me, or I was better than other people, or I was smarter than other people, or if my sister liked it, you shouldn't join that club, whatever. And just shut up and just ask people who obviously it was working for, what are you doing? And
When
will
did
you
you, when
help
you
me?
said 26 years later, like what was rock bottom for you that made you change your mind?
I don't know. I don't know what happened that day. I really don't. I I don't think I had one thing at the bottom. I sort of described that I sort of bounced along the bottom.
Yeah.
And I there's a saying in AA where they say I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I think on some level that's what happened. Is this it's some I just someday I couldn't do my life. And
Hmm.
I knew where it was. I knew who could help me. It wasn't like I had to go into the phone book or, you know, so it was just a me. It was, oh, there actually was something. Although I wasn't at a bottom, I was going to go to Brazil to visit some friends, and I had to go into San Francisco to get my visa done. They take it and then you wait and then they do whatever. And I went into a department store and I ran into a friend who had struggled the same way I did. And I hadn't seen her in 10 years.
Hmm.
But she knew that I had gone to these 12-step programs and she'd kind of always teased me about it. So after 10 years, we're standing in the women's department of this department store and she hugged me and she just said, You'll never guess what I'm doing. And I called her that night. And, she was like an angel that walked into my life. And they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So how come I was ready that day? I don't know. But
Mm.
I know that when I saw her and when she said that, I just felt like I was hanging on for dear life. Just tell me what to do, tell me what to do. And I did it.
And what was kind of the crux of the program? What was it formulaic? Like you can't, these are the foods you can't eat for this much time, or like how did it work that it actually
Well,
broke through for you?
we get a food plan
Okay.
accompanied by a lot of spiritual, you know, uplifting things that basically say you can do it. And the food plan is a list of foods that don't contain added sugars or grains. So, and for people like me who don't know, I mean, I didn't know that there was twice the sugar in a nectarine than a peach. So, we eat peaches, but we don't eat nectarines because there's so much sugar in nectarines. We don't eat grapes. And that the fear is it'll trigger. Nobody knows for sure how similar we all are in the triggering process. But the plan is extremely abundant. I mean, once I let go of thinking I had to eat tuna fish and cottage cheese, and that was it, and also had to let go of that food was the enemy, because then we're given this food plan, we're given a sponsor, somebody that we can hold hands with and call every day and say, what do I do now? What do I do now? So, I mean, literally, it's a mentor. And um, she taught me what do you call it, recipes that were wonderful. And slowly, 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 I learned how to cook a little bit. I'm still not a great cook, but I learned how to like food. And they say,
Mm,
enjoy your food, enjoy your meals. If you don't, you'll start binging again.
yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. And over these last 19 years, my tastes have changed. I mean, I never ate a vegetable, I don't think, and now there's some vegetables that I just love, and yeah, I don't miss what I don't eat.
Now, do you see, because I know I was speaking actually to a man several months ago who struggled with drugs. And he told me that, he has to stay in a recovery program so that he doesn't go back. He said, people will say to an addict, are you recovered? He's like, I'm still very susceptible to just going back to that. So I have to stay in an accountability group and I have to be plugged in or else I will just go back. It's not something that I'm just gonna disappear from my life if I just work hard enough at this. Um, for you, like, are you still involved with that program or still have a mentor that kind of checks up on you? Or do you feel that you actually can say completely, I'm recovered from my food addiction? It's not something I don't get these cravings anymore. It's not something that I struggle with.
Earlier you said something about having a hole in your, and needing to fill it. And what the program provides is other people with the same problem so that I can walk into a meeting and say, hi, I'm Sarah, I'm a food addict. And they practically know my entire history,
Yeah.
because they've been there. Well, that is a very precious, precious thing. I may not like all the people, but they understand me. They get me, they grok me. And that's what I think fills up that hole now is that I'm in community. I have other communities. I have a writing community, I have other communities, but this community um, is so precious to me because I think each one of us really, really wants to be seen and wants to be understood. And they know they've been there, they understand. They may not
Yeah.
always be able to articulate it, but I know that they know. And, when we're talking in meetings, you can see people like little bobbleheads, they've been there. And so
So you still do the
so
meetings?
I do go to meetings and
Yeah.
I do more. I mean, I do a lot of service work for them, not only writing this book, but I do some things anonymously. I I want the program to be there for the next person who's looking for it. And I want people like me to always be present to make sure that if somebody comes knocking on the door, there's somebody to open it and say, "Yeah, you're welcome here and we get it." And so, if I don't know what would happen, Danielle, if I weren't to go to meetings. Maybe I would stay absent, maybe I wouldn't. My my sort of thought is I would do it maybe for a year or two, but that brain of mine, that mind of mine is really, really sneaky.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think it would start, you can do this, you can do that. And I don't know that I'd be able to get back into recovery if I ever started binging again. So I basically don't want to take the risk. It doesn't ask much of me. It
Yeah.
just, I go to a meeting, I see people I like. Um, it reminds me to do certain things every day, and that it's a very, very small price to pay for this incredible gift I've been given. So, yeah, it doesn't ask much of me.
What do you think is a thought that you believe about yourself that you don't think you've yet disbelieved? Because, like you said, the mind is very powerful, and a lot of mental struggles people deal with, it's all about the mind and what you think. Thinking is very powerful and it can drive what you do, it can drive what you eat, it can drive how I mean, it drives how people live, right? What they think about themselves, what they think about the world. And I know for me personally, like one thing that I've always struggled with to believe is that I am loved. I think it's like I intuitively know that's true. There are people around me who say that, and I know they mean it. But for me, I had some very important people in my life who I gave my heart to, trusted that they did, and then they really didn't. And that kind of set off for me this idea that, okay, I'm not actually loved. So even if someone tells me it, it's not really true because they'll just walk away. Eventually, they'll be gone. And that's something that I am continually working on to renew my mind to trust, okay, what someone says, so far, they've not left me. They've proven their love, they've shown it, so I need to trust that they do love me when they say it and that I am loved. Is there like a thought for you that you still struggle with that comes back, even if it's not related to the binging, that you wish you could turn off and believe what's actually true?
You know, it's a wonderful question. And I think that at my age, I'm in my late 70s, um, I think things just don't matter that much. But when you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, I struggled with that for so long. And what I came to realize is that a lot of those people who said I loved you to me, they they did to the best of their ability, but it wasn't what I wanted, it wasn't what I needed. I mean, it was my mother all over again, if you will, and that it was my job to find the people that gave the kind of love that I wanted, and and stop hanging out with these jerks basically. And it's one of the reasons I've stayed in Paris. I only came here for 1 year, but I have found such a community of wonderful people
Mm.
that genuinely like me and want to be around me. And I don't question it the way I used to. And maybe it was like a brand new start, that like with as because I started writing here also. I can't really say, but it's made those questions go away. And there's a lot of acceptance involved also because I probably will never have a partner that I live with. I don't think I could live with another person. I'm so set in my ways and I love my space and I love my cat and so but I accept that now that it just wasn't my path. I don't think of it as some God is punishing me or I did something wrong.
Right.
It just and turns out, oh my God, there's so many women that are single, and we can't all be bad, and we find each other. We I know everybody. The expat community here isn't huge, and so it here in Paris has really made a lot of those voices take a hike. And I'm very grateful for that. And I did. It took me 10 years to say I this is going to be my home and sell your home in the United States, which I did, and make this your home. But that's one of the reasons why that I really belong. I feel like I belong here. And too much history back in California, maybe.
Well, I mean, that
Does that
just,
help? Does that answer your
yeah,
question?
no, it
Yeah.
does. I was gonna say too, though, you've mentioned spirituality several times. Was that part of your recovery journey for you in any way, or?
Well, I think I was raised a Quaker and I loved the Quaker. I mean, I'll say religion, but the contemplative Quakers aren't particularly religious. And I went to a Quaker summer camp and we would, have our meetings outside every morning, and hour-long ones. And I've just always hung on to being a Quaker and the Quaker beliefs. There's several paths that Quakers take, and mine was the contemplative Quaker, which is unfortunately dying out. And when I went into the 12-step program, it's very similar, uh, to being a Quaker, that um, so it wasn't something I had to work at. I
Okay.
don't like organized religion. I really don't. I mean, I'm still, don't want people telling me what to do, and but um, but I think I probably started calling what I believe in and this whole path that I just told you about. I think I probably started calling it spirituality once I was in the program because it's referred to so much, that we refer to a higher power. It doesn't really matter what it is, just as long as it's not me. And, I'm not the one who has the answers for myself. There's something out there, and um, I'm basically discovered that I'm a fairly optimistic person, which I don't know where, was that person hiding all those years that I was so miserable?
Hmm.
Um, it's really interesting what's being uncovered, and the more these kind of I'll say miracles, the more these things happen that make me happy and make me grateful, the more I kind of say the spirituality is, I don't understand it, but it's all part of the human condition, the human mystery. And who am I to question it? I'm going to go with it, and just not be a rebel, at least not in this area of my life.
So when you mean contemplative Quaker, is it more of, I'm thinking along the lines of like, oh, what's his name? Like Pharaoh with Walter. Like kind of like a connection with the universe in a sense, but there's not really an understanding of it. It's more of just I'm accepting that connection and meditating on that connection and finding that rest from it. Is that what you mean by when you say meditative Quaker. Is that it's not really focusing on a specific thing, it's just focusing on something.
Sometimes they focus on a specific thing.
Okay.
So meeting for worship takes place in, a very humble building with wooden pews and, nothing fancy, no robes, nothing. And once a month, at least when I was growing up, there would be a query, a question would be asked, but it was a question that everybody would have their own answer for.
Okay.
How do I live my life as a good wife or a good husband? Well, everybody's going to have, but you think you spend the hour thinking about it. And
Okay.
most people will, sort of self-correct and say, I'm gonna work on this part of it. I think I could do that better. And then the other 3 Sundays a month for, um, there's nothing specific, but people, if they're moved, will stand up and share something. Again, not political, but something in their heart that they want to share with other people, which is the part that's similar to 12-step programs.
Okay.
Uh, so, the very simple way of saying it is that Quakers believe that when I'm talking to you, the God in me is talking to the God in you. So you know, that means watch what you say. Don't use words that would, make a nice person want to run away. Look them in the eye, be sincere, because you're talking to another God. And we don't think that way on a daily basis, but you meditate on it. So it's called contemplative because we sit down and meditate on a lot of things.
Right.
And
Okay.
that summer camp we were taught to, as little kids, started going when I was 9. We were taught to go find poems that spoke to us and then share the poem, in the meeting for worship. And it was a wonderful exercise to go up into the little camp library and for poetry and what spoke to me might be very different than what spoke to I loved who I was when I went to that summer camp. So that is I had forgotten that, but so the rest of the year I really hated myself, but there was so much direction without being told what to do. It was all outside. And it really filled that hole in my soul. And interestingly enough, every time June would roll around, I didn't want to go. I wanted to be with my friends. They were all going to the beach for the summer. And as soon as I got there, I loved being there. And it's just something that's a teenager can't really describe what was so attractive about it. Listen to me now. I'm even having trouble describing it now, but it was very, very important part of my life.
And you're saying these meetings, like, it would just happen during the summer, or was it year round, or?
Well, um, we went as a family to Sunday meeting for worship,
Okay.
and um, I grew up in outside of Philadelphia, so we went to a meeting there, and then we moved around a lot because my father was a university professor, and different universities were always trying to get him. Um, by the time I graduated from university, my parents weren't going at all anymore, so I was going by myself. And when I moved out to California, the Bay Area, it was during the years of, protesting Vietnam, and it would
Okay.
people would stand up and talk politics, and I couldn't stand it. So I stopped going.
Hmm.
So, finding the 12-step programs and that is so similar and you know, the 12 steps, there literally are 12 steps that it's suggested strongly that we do. And one of them is to to meditate, find a time each day to just slow down, stop this fast pace of life, sit and just think about things. And if you don't know what to think about, here's a little book, a daily book of meditations, and it will give you a focus, and so it's brought me back to that. And there is a Quaker community here in Paris, and it's French. They all speak French. And when I went, I didn't feel particularly invited, included. So I went 3 times and I haven't gone back. And I keep telling myself I will. I have to make a bigger try, but we'll see.
What do it's interesting because I can tell from the way you're talking, like it is important to you and you do really love community and discovering meaning in things and finding it. Um, what is something you really want to know, maybe before, because like you said, you're older, and I'm thinking, I mean, I'm 25 and I already am thinking it. I don't know if that's just part of the age we're living in because young people are older inside, maybe. But is there something that you would like to know before you pass away that you would like to be able to go, I know this for sure, and that is very comforting to me?
What an interesting question. And, well, a lot of things that when we're younger and seem so important, they just start falling away as you get older. They just lose their importance. Not all of them, but a
Yeah.
lot of them. And I think I'd want to know, I'd want to be able to say to myself anyway, that once I was able, which meant that I was no longer a victim of the disease. Once I was able and made choices, that I had been the best citizen on this planet that I could be, and that the choices I did make. So I was, it's 20 years ago. So I was like 57, when I came into these programs and into the food program. Um, so, my mother lived to be 95. So, it'll be, a good 40 years probably that I will be in recovery, so to speak. I'll be able to make good choices. And I'd like to feel that I really have done my best to be a good citizen. And I wasn't part of any other problem, that I was always trying to look forward. You didn't ask politics questions, but I had a strong reaction to what happened this week, and I had to sit myself down and say, you know, what happened this week, and you are not going to change how you feel about your writing. You're not going to change how you feel about your friends. You're going to keep doing the best you can. And I've never talked to myself that way, that quickly after something happened that I didn't like. And I would get depressed. I would, I would let the fact that I didn't like it then overcome me. And I just thought that's not that's not who I am anymore. I can still write. Words are important.
Hmm.
Writers are really talking to each other, this week, and so I hope that I can keep improving on that my outlook stays optimistic. Maybe not for the world. I don't know what's going to happen in the world, but at least in my little community.
Yeah.
And and that I'm being the best person, the best friend, the best writer I can be, and not to give up on myself. You know, I can't believe that I say this, but I really like myself today from this little girl who hated herself so much and didn't know what was wrong with her. And I can say, I now know what's wrong with me. I'm human, for one thing, and I had a disease, and I treated it. I'm treating it. I could have a lot worse diseases, and I don't. Um, and and now I just put one foot forward and make good choices. It's not quite an answer that for the rest of my life, but I think if I were to not wake up tomorrow morning, if I were to die in my sleep, I think I could tell you 100% that I would die feeling that I wouldn't be regretting anything.
Hmm.
Maybe one thing. Um, my sister and I have had a very rocky relationship over the many years because both of us had this problem. And we've really both been working on getting to be sisters. And it's wonderful. And I'm going to spend Christmas with her. And if there were any regrets, that would be the regret that I didn't get more time with her.
Yeah.
But
But
otherwise,
no, I was just gonna say, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. I'm also really glad that you're reconnecting with her because a lot of people can't say that, you know. A lot of
yeah,
times they haven't seen their family member in quite some time and that's it.
I feel very grateful that she wants to reconnect with me, and we really had a hard time with each other, didn't like each other at all. And I think we both want this. We're very different, and we go about it in ways that I think the other person doesn't understand. But we're really making a lot of room for each other to make mistakes. And so far, neither one of us has said, "I don't want to see you again." In fact, each time she lives in Michigan, each time I go there, I spend a little bit longer time. So
That's a
it's,
good sign.
yeah, it's a good sign.
Well, Sarah, I mean, first of all, I want to thank you for writing your memoir because I think it's a very important topic and I think it's comforting to others to hear your story. Um, and I'm so grateful too that you came on and were willing to talk about it and answer questions about your life. And I'm really happy to hear too that you're in this stage of life where you're not depending on food for that comfort. And so it was really neat to get to connect with you.
Thank you, Danielle. This was fun. You asked good questions. Yeah, this was really nice. And you shared a little bit about yourself, which was really nice too. Made
I'm
it easy.
glad. Yes, it is. It's easier to, it's not like I'm an automaton, right? Just shooting questions at
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
So, but thank you again, Sarah. And for listeners, I will have her link to her website and you'll be able to see her memoir and purchase that. There's even a way to contact Sarah. So if you ended up reading it and really
I
enjoyed it.
also write a Substack about my life in Paris.
I
It's sort
saw the blog. That's
Yeah,
also there.
yeah,
Yes.
out my window. Yeah, but which I really enjoy writing. So that
So,
that I keep up with. The website on Facebook I don't keep up with as much.
all right, so maybe check out her blog too. I'll figure out a way to link both of them.
sarasomers.substack.com.
Okay. I'll find a way to link both. All
Great.
right, Sarah. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Danielle.
Bye.